Right, I'm going to discuss the edit actually at the moment. That's kind of I find it easier to talk about this because obviously I've been so kind of you've had a month of edit. Well, I've had a month of editing and color correction and all that sort of stuff and things like that. And I find it'll be easier if I just talk through the process, I think, as opposed to write it down. But there'll be a lot of stills from the edit and stuff like that. I'll screen capture a lot of stuff from Premiere to hopefully, if you're looking through the gallery now, you'll see kind of. Please take note of the sort of the sequences and stuff like that to see where I've made cuts and what's changed. And generally speaking, wherever there's a cut, it means that I've removed a chunk of something. So that's sort of it's not just for cutting between shot to shot generally, until the final edit where there's going to be like a Mango audio track and you'll be able to see that way. But yeah, the edit sort of, as a whole, it's been a really enlightening process for me in terms of kind of learning, because editing's something that I'd really like to do in the future. And I think learning stuff like pacing and things, paying very strong attention to things like pacing has been very very difficult to kind of teach myself throughout this process, because I think especially considering we filmed improv, we had such a glut of raw footage. It was really difficult to get the best bits and stuff like that and kind of go through and go like, right, this is the funniest of the funny stuff and this is not funny and that kind of thing, because it's very difficult to, after watching something for about 2 times, the humour's gone for you as a person, and it's quite trying to edit something to be funny without yourself finding it funny at the time, because you're obviously stressing about how it's going to go. It was really difficult. But yeah, I'll talk through first off my cutting process. Basically, the way that I'd approach every scene in regards to the edit is I'd find the take I liked, which was generally speaking one of the last 2. I mentioned earlier that the way we shot it was we'd probably have about 5 takes. First 3 would be the actors kind of figuring out where they're at, and then the third take would be the best of those first 3. And then for the last two, we'd get the actors to do completely fresh takes, and generally speaking, those were the best. I don't know if it was something to do with the flow or they'd understood the pacing and things, but generally speaking, that was the best stuff. So I'd take the 2 camera angles we got from the Z5s on the take that I'd like the most. And then what I'd do is I'd sync those up basically and just get them all in order, and then kind of approach it from sort of a multicam editing sort of perspective really. And basically I'd go like, right, from the very rough start I'd go like, right, okay, so we need to cut to this actor talking, and then 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 kind of just go through the entire scene like that. And generally speaking, these scenes all started out at about 10 minutes long each, so you can tell purely from that how much just pure stuff I've cut out, because the final running time I believe is 25 minutes long including credits, 21 minutes without. So it's good to like that kind of gives you a sense of how much I've removed. So once I'd got everything in order in terms of shots wise, then I'd start going through and trying to be as ruthless as I could with the cutting, going like, right, is this relevant to the plot or relevant to the pace? If it wasn't relevant to the plot, then it would generally speaking be removed. If it ruined the but the way I'd do that, so I'd go, sorry, let me restart that. So I'd ask myself, when there's a bit of dialogue, I'd say, right, is this relevant to the plot? If it wasn't relevant to the plot, I'd then go further and ask myself, does this affect the pacing? Because generally speaking, like, there's a lot of really funny stuff in there that isn't necessarily relevant to the plot. But just because it isn't relevant to the plot doesn't mean it shouldn't be in there. The only reason it shouldn't be in there is if it's affecting the pacing of the piece, and that's what was so critical about the thing. And I think that's why so much of it's been cut down, because if it hadn't been, if it was pure just unadulterated footage with just cuts to different cameras, the piece would probably be about 50 minutes long, and I think it would really suffer for it, because it would just be very slow in terms of movement and things like that. So I think removing chunks of footage was a huge part of it, and it's not something that's, generally speaking, like, it's not something I'm hugely experienced with, I guess, because working on traditionally sort of scripted pieces beforehand, I'd always know what had to be in there and what didn't have to be in there, because either it was written in and it was important to the plot. There's no generally speaking, there wasn't any extra guff kind of in scripted pieces, but with improvisation, it's all guff essentially, and it's just getting all that guff together and making it cohesive and make sense. Yeah, so that was that. Obviously, I removed stuff in sort of in kind of phases. Really, I'd have one phase of removing things, put it all in order, give it a watch, remove even more if it wasn't paced right, and then it's now down to the final edit where I think it's going to be paced better. And I think if I do go back and perhaps re-edit it after the crit, it will probably get longer, to be honest, because I'm quite attached to the footage, and it'll be quite difficult to fully consider getting rid of it. There's a lot of scenes that we filmed that were removed as well for pacing reasons and stuff like that. There's things like this. If you look on Michael's blog, he's recut them as trailers and vignette pieces basically, because they're not going into the main edit, and they're really nice. But you'll see what I mean. They don't directly affect the plot, and if they were in there, it would affect the pacing, I think, slightly. Colour correction, I've already done a post on colour correction, so as I said, it's all greens and blues and that kind of thing. That was something I did towards the end of the piece, kind of just making it look stylistic and interesting in comparison to something like Curb, which has obviously been a big influence on us in regards to improv. It's quite, in terms of visually speaking, it's I think quite dull. I think in terms of content, it's great, but visually speaking, it's there. It's cut for content, not for style. And I think while ours has been cut the same, it has been cut for content. That's why I think there's a few shots that aren't perfect, but I think the sacrifice we'd make by losing the really good content for good footage wouldn't be worth it. I don't think so. It was just finding that balance once again. Yeah, in regards to, I'll do a little bit on audio editing, because it's one of the things I'm not very satisfied with in the piece. Basically, I've learnt a lesson in regards to, I now know that, actually no, I'll talk about audio in a separate post, actually. I'll just do a quick chat on it and just explain that I recognise the issues. But yeah, so it was all cut together, that kind of thing. I mentioned in the video post on tone, I spoke about the use of the sort of bang kind of scene, and then the description of the scene and stuff like that. The thing that I played with in terms of the thing that was interesting about this is it was trying to put in jokes in post as well, and either it was a lot of generating in pauses for the characters, like sort of, so if someone says something funny, basically I'd pick a certain joke that would kind of be, yeah, this is the joke that's good for this part of the scene, and then I'd pick that joke and then kind of base all of my cuts around that. So you'd have, perhaps, say for example, it's Jay who played Luke saying something stupid. He says something stupid, and then there needs to be a pause afterwards because the viewer needs to register that that's something dumb. And then the payoff to the joke is the reaction from the other guys, and they go, "What are you doing? You're an idiot. What's going on?" or something. It's obviously paraphrasing. They do it much wittier than me because they're actors. But yeah, so it's just kind of, it's engineering where in the actual footage, it's kind of in the raw footage, it's kind of a case of like sort of Jay will say something like, "Oh, blah, blah, I'm simple," and then the guys will go, "Yeah, you're really simple. You're an idiot." There wouldn't be a pause there. It's just a complete undiluted splurge of dialogue, so it's just kind of dragging out those scenes, and I'd have to sort of hatchet in footage from different places and do kind of little bits of like cutting magic and stuff like that to try and get it all in order. But yeah, no, I think it's really benefited from it all in all. Like I said, please do have a look at because I think the stills from the edit will do what I'm saying far more justice than me actually saying it. So yeah, I do hope that's kind of explanatory and stuff like that. And thanks. I'll do a evaluation post next. So see you then.